In conversation with Business Insider's Shona GHOSH, the European Commission's Vice President for Values and Transparency, Vėra JOUROVÁ, will next be discussing how to protect our democracies.
Vice President JOUROVÁ, thank you so much for joining us in this talk. I'm really excited to talk to you about defending democracy in Europe. First off, just a small question. What to you is the major threat to democracy in Europe right now?
The major threat to democracy in Europe, I think, is that we stop believing that it works. And we hear it from different member states from different part of the society. Between 30 to 40% of people regularly give us the feedback. Democracy doesn't work because we don't see enough justice, we do not see enough fairness, we do not see enough stability. In fact, democracy for many people is more unnerving that it is sowing instability and uncertainty. So this is, I think, a very big task for us, for the Democrats, to make more effort to convince the people that democracy works and they have the say in it. That's why we are, for instance, working on the rules for fair and free elections, where the people need to have their free voice. And this is a critical moment for Europe, because if we undermine the importance of democracy, we will have a big problem to keep the society going.
It sounds like there's a huge raft of measures needed to even begin to solve that problem. But let's drill down a little bit into technology and the online world. To what extent do you feel that social media plays a part in this issue of perhaps growing distrust in democracy, or even is perhaps a cause of it? So what is the role that social media plays there?
I have heard so many dark pictures or dark descriptions of how internet is endangering our life that I will refrain from that. I am not going to say only bad things, because there are so many good things. Education, enlightenment, opening eyes, opening horizons for the people. Internet, I think, was meant, and social media were meant to connect people and maybe educate. And, at the same time, of course, so we saw that it enables for the bad actors to use this space as well. And so we have to be able to develop the good sides and good features, and to address in a very targeted way the risks, not to damage the beauty of democratic debate or beauty. We have to mention also the algorithms, that there is not so much free democratic debate anymore. This is one of the issues we want to focus on. But we want to address in targeted manner the main risks, and to keep the digital space as free as possible, so that it also reflects the achievements of Europe over centuries, because over centuries we were seeking for establishing free society. It has to remain also online.
When we think about the big social media firms, when we think about the online platforms, both in terms of good and ill, we're generally talking about 2 or 3 big companies here. They're based in the US. We're generally talking about Facebook, Google, and to some extent Twitter. You've met some of the top people at these companies, haven't you? We know we've spoken to Twitter's CEO. Who have you found to be most receptive to the ideas that you're putting forward? You know, out of those big tech CEOs, you know, who are all the way in California, who do you find to be most receptive to your ideas and European ideas of democracy and how it plays out online?
I don't want to do any ranking or any assessment. I don't want to be unfair. But at the same time, I have to say that the time of unregulated Wild West is over. You know, we are preparing the regulation also in a permanent consultation process with the big players, which you mentioned, because we wanted this to be inclusive process. Many people moved literally to the space occupied by Facebook, Google, Twitter, several others, and we need the rules to follow the people there. Because we have good rules. We have good rules which guarantee the freedom of speech. We also have good rules to guarantee security of people. And we have to shift the rules to the online space where they will have to be respected. We need more certainty. We cannot continue just on the basis of the gentleman agreements with the big tech. And they are also moving. I know that the European Union is a tough cookie for them sometimes because we like to have rules to bring back decency and predictability of what's going on online. But I also remember the times when I was in California several years ago, where still I spoke to the managers of big tech, without naming them, who still were convinced that they are only the pipes, that they have nothing to do with the content, or they have nothing to do with the impact on the society. It's over. And it was a big step forward when we agreed on with Google, Twitter, with Facebook, with several others, that there must be decency, that there must be a security guarantee to all the people, all the groups of society. And we are now at the moment when we say the codes, the voluntary codes of conduct can work, but in a limited period. And now the time is ripe for having the rules. And we really tried, because we will adopt the rules on the 2nd of December. It will be the set of principles enshrined in the legally binding rules, which will increase the responsibility of the platforms. We worked hard to make this rules-making process very inclusive. So the big tech were involved in our debate, so that we come with the rules which will be efficient and feasible. We consulted a lot with academics sphere, with the civil society, of course with the member states, because they will be those who will apply the rules. And this will be a big step forward in Europe to come with the legally binding rules, which will cover the whole business sphere, not only several big players.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we're expecting this package of proposed regulation legislation in December, the Digital Services Act and accompanying rules to go with it as well. Just pulling back a bit, what can we practically expect from that? You know, there's been some draft documents that are sort of publicly available and some indications of what will happen, but actually the general public may not necessarily be aware that some quite big changes are potentially about to happen. So just for the consumer, for your average person who may be tuned in, what are the major changes that we can potentially expect as a result of these proposed rules that come in December?
I will use some of the buzzwords we use in Europe. We want to increase fairness and transparency and legal certainty. Fairness and transparency will be important for the citizens of European Union. Just notice I am not speaking about consumers. I speak about citizens. For me, this is important to stress because for the consumers, there has been prepared a very big trap, and these are the bubbles, where it's easier to sell when the people are chased into the bubbles where it's better or it's more efficient to do targeted marketing. And we don't want this to be applied for the citizens. Yeah, so this is what I mean about fairness and about transparency. For the tech world, I think that we are coming with the necessary legal certainty, because maybe the rules in Europe might be seen as more rigid than, for instance, in the United States. But we want to come with the rules which will address in a proportionate way the problems we see. And where is the problem? It's the lack of responsibility on the side of the tech industry. And I don't mean only the big tech we are discussing the things with, but we need to cover the whole market. If we only make voluntary agreements with some, there will be bigger and bigger space for those who do not feel themselves bound by any agreements, and they will go their unregulated way. So we want to increase the responsibility of the platforms for the content. We want to come with the rules for regarding or relating to illegal content. Illegal in terms of European law. What is illegal offline must be illegal online. So there will be increased responsibility for the platforms to detect and remove the content when it is obviously illegal. There will be increased transparency about what's happening, because the authors of the messages should be given some redress possibility. Yeah, because the main principle we need to maintain for Europe is the freedom of speech. That's why we are very careful in setting these rules. In the European Democracy Action Plan, which is a twin initiative to the Digital Services Act, we want to focus on increasing the probability that we will maintain free and fair elections. Because at this moment, what we see in several member states already, and what we saw on Brexit campaign, the manipulation, which was abusing the private data of people and abusing the knowledge of preferences and fears and predispositions of the people was increasing, and it is endangering the free elections. We want to address the issue of disinformation, which we do not deem as illegal content, but the content which requires some attention. Here, the need to maintain the freedom of speech as the primary principle is even more urgent. So we do not want to damage that principle.
It's hard, isn't it? How do you challenge misinformation, disinformation? You're saying that's not illegal content, and so I can infer from that, Facebook, Google, all these other mega platforms won't necessarily face fines or punishment if they don't take down this content necessarily. How will you really enforce that? How will you enforce that reduction in misinformation if it isn't sort of legislated for?
If I simplify it, taking down content, it is relating more to the illegal content, which is child pornography, which is terrorist content, which is extremist content promoting extremism, plus hate speech in its brutal form, if I may define it like that, in the form which is already defined by many courts in many member states as illegal. Yeah, so this is the content we want to be removed and to be given the possibility for the authors for redress, but at the same time, which will invite the platforms to cooperate with the law enforcement authorities, because we speak about the crime. In the world of disinformation and misinformation, it's much more subtle. So we will come with the definition of what we mean by disinformation, which requires action, which requires, for instance, increased activity of the fact-checkers, response from those who know the facts, to add the facts to the platform. There are several ways how to address the disinformation without directly removing that. And we really don't want to damage the fabric or the principle of the freedom of speech. We will come with the definitions. We will address more the behavior than the content itself. We will encourage also those who pay the advertisers to think over whether they want to support something which is potentially very harmful for the society. So there will be a mixture of non-legislative and potentially legislative measures against the threats to democracy, threats to the elections, including disinformation. So I think that on the 2nd of December, we will show more about what we think about, how to put it, it's a bit poetic, but how we see the European digital soul.
Sort of speaking generally about the EU's impact on regulation around the world, sort of it's widely acknowledged that GDPR has really set the tone for certainly privacy regulation in US states, for example, California. Are you hoping to achieve something similar with the Digital Services Act and the accompanying regulation and proposals that, you know, America, perhaps even China, other major markets may look at this legislation and say, actually, we can go further as well? Are you having those kinds of discussions where you're seeing international regulators show interest in the kinds of steps that you're going to take, the further and quite serious steps that the Digital Services Act is going to bring in, and talking about how that can influence regulation around the world?
We have such ambition. Because GDPR, although it sounds technically demanding or difficult issue, it is based on a very simple idea that the people should have under their control. Individual people, each citizen should have under his or her control what's happening to their data, to their identity when they move online. And we want to continue this same philosophy, that we want to keep all the freedom in the online world. We want to make it decent space where there is more transparency and more rules which will address the crime. And I believe that the European Union is well placed to come with something meaningful, something which will not be under the pressure of big money and big omnipotent state interest. Here I speak about the United States and China. Because we see that in the United States, of course, the business has always found a way to promote their way. I always say that the Californian law does not apply in Europe. We have our own rules, which are also stemming from our history and our legal traditions. So the regulation and rules driven by the money, it's not a good thing. As well, it's not a good thing when the rules are driven by the state, which wants to have the absolute control over the citizens. You see those two poles. European Union wants to go its own way, and it will sound very ambitious, but we would like to offer the rules we are going to design to the rest of democratic world, because we believe that our rules will pay full respect to the individual citizens who are the people who should enjoy all the freedoms.
Let's see how the world receives that template in December when we see the full package in public. Thank you so much for your time, and it's back to the guys at Web Summit in Lisbon. Thank you so much.